Hello everybody, good afternoon, welcome back to Garibaldi Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live. I'm Max Sels, your host, and here today to discuss Forest's transfer window business, as well as look ahead to Bournemouth on Sunday. Joining me to chat about all of that and more, it is TalkSport broadcaster and Forest fan Max Scott. Max, I can imagine yesterday was a incredibly busy day for you, or maybe not, given that deadline day is kind of not what it used to be, potentially.
Yeah, it's a bit of an anticlimax. I think when the sporting story of transfer deadline day is an F1 story that Lewis Hamilton's gone to Ferrari, then you know that there's, I think, changing tides in the football finance world, and we're seeing the impact of that in deadline day. But no, as ever, transfer deadline day is exciting regardless. So yeah, it was good.
Yeah, no, good stuff. We are live as well on YouTube and Facebook, Nottingham Forest News and Garibaldi Red on YouTube. So any comments you've got about the January transfer window, what you've made of it, all of that, remember to get them in. And me and Max will do our best to answer those and have a chat, really. Max, I suppose let's begin then with a bit of an interesting January transfer window for Forest, probably the quietest in a long time, which is mad to say that there's still quite a lot of outgoings and 3 signings come through the door. The owners adopting this kind of net zero approach. What did you actually make to the window overall before we kind of have a look at more in-depth signings that we brought in?
It's a simple question, but I think it's quite difficult to answer. What do I make of the window? I mean, we've become so used to players coming in. I think the big story of Forest transfer window is about Mangala leaving. He's arguably been our most consistent player from the start of the season, one of our highest performers, incredibly composed on the ball. I think he's just very consistent and good for a side like Forest that are struggling towards the bottom of the table. But, again, a bit like transfer deadline day as a whole, I think the selling of Mangala is a symptom of the increased strictness of the Premier League's profitability and sustainability rules. And so I do think that we are victim of that. Obviously, we have charges against us. And so, in a way, although it's sad to see someone like Mangala go, it's refreshing to see the club, I think, take this, quote, net zero approach. It's much more careful. It's much more considered, regardless of whether we receive a points deduction. It does indicate that perhaps there is going to be a better approach moving forward. So really interesting for Forest, but despite that, there's still last minute sort of, scraps trying to get Chuba Akpom in, it sounds like. And so there's still the typical sort of Forest trying to bring in some last minute deals on deadline day. But that's entertaining, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And probably a bit of PR as well, maybe from the ownership that want to be kind of known as that club that's getting the last minute deals through on deadline day, and Sky are flipping to somebody outside the City ground. I suppose when we look at actually the players we brought in, and we'll touch on Mangala in a moment, 3 signings through the door: Reyna, Rodrigo, Ribeiro, and Matz Sels, who's probably going to be the most important if we're going to look at that. Players out the door included Mangala, as you mentioned, Scott McKenna, Andre Santos, given his loan was terminated, and Alex Might and Brandon Aguilera go out on loan. Ethan Horvath on a permanent move to Cardiff. So more outgoings than in, which is probably a positive, as you touched on. Let's start with the keeper situation, Max. Talked about for weeks, for months amongst Forest fans. And the criticism really doesn't stop for Ethan Horvath, especially after the goal he conceded against Arsenal on Tuesday night. Do you think that's probably going to be the most important 5 million that Forest have spent this season on a new goalkeeper in Matz Sels?
Yes, is the short answer. The bigger answer is the fact that it's taken 25, 30 million quid, whatever it is, that might not be fully accurate, but a lot of money to sort of 3 goalkeepers later to get the man that you want. And, let's be honest, it sounds like Sam Johnston was the one that they wanted. It sounds like Kelleher from Liverpool was also in the mix. And so, of course, Sels is going to get our backing as fans. Of course, we want like we do for Matt Turner, want him to perform. But it doesn't, like any club, that is quite a rare thing. You're always going to have a number of different targets that you go for. They've obviously got one. It's at a pretty decent price. What I find quite interesting is Newcastle fans online have been giving Forest pelters for this transfer. Now, they do have a bit of sort of fuel in the tank because of the amount of money we gave them for Chris Wood and taking John Joe Shelby off their hands. But I did a little bit of a look into his Newcastle career. I think he played 9 times. And Newcastle fans didn't like one goal he conceded against Aston Villa, which was an equaliser. Other than that, he seems to have a pretty good career. I'm not going to sit on this podcast, Max, and pretend that I'm a French Ligue 1 expert, because I'm not. Don't watch it. I don't want to watch it. But, it sounds like he's a good player. It sounds like he's solid. He's 31 years old. He's experienced. And let's just hope that he avoids clangers, because I would say, actually, Matt Turner had a pretty good game against Arsenal, other than, the cardinal sin of allowing a goal at your near post. So, it clearly he needs some time out of the limelight, and hopefully Sels' experience will be what we need, and just add a little bit of sort of trust and solidity at the back there.
Do you think Sels will play on Bournemouth against Sunday? Do you think he's going to slot straight into the side, surely?
I think if you're buying, so we've now got 4 goalkeepers, haven't we? Hennessy, Vlack, Turner, and now Sels. If you're disrupting that, bringing in a 4th goalkeeper, I think you've got to back yourself and be like, and particularly for him, if you're bringing him in, he's probably coming in on the promise that he's leaving a club that he's been at, I think, for 6 years. And so he's probably on a promise. I think that's what Forest fans want, and say what you want about the Marinakis family. I think they're very plugged into what fans think and the feeling of the fans. I think that's why they didn't sack Cooper on numerous occasions, because they knew the feeling amongst fans. And so I would put, I'd bet £5 on him starting, and I don't think that it would be such a bad decision.
Very interesting, and you touch on there as well, him maybe not being the first choice keeper for Forest. Johnston was linked, and a few others too. Even rumours that they were going to go for Butland at one point on deadline day. It's never easy, really, and it's never quiet for Forest on deadline day. It always seems to be this mad scramble. When we look at, we'll probably come back to the keeper situation shortly, Max. But when we look at the 2 other players you've brought in. Gio Reyna, as I think, was probably the most exciting. 21 years old, loan deal until the end of the season from Dortmund. Considered what people call kind of a real rising star in football. George Mendes, client who the Marinakis family are back working with now. He can operate as a winger and attacking midfielder. So this is a versatile player. This is someone that will hopefully do a job for Forest, provide more options in that midfield area and in the attacking areas. Now Mangala's gone, and maybe with fitness issues with Chris Wood, Taiwo, and if Morgan got injured for whatever reason. So that's a positive signing for me, Max. Probably the most exciting this window, obviously, given that we've kind of only had 3.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone tells you that they know about Rodrigo Ribero's academy career, is a liar. So, or that they know about the ins and outs of a Belgian goalkeeper. So definitely Reyna is the, he's the blockbuster signing. I think at best, like I say, he's blockbuster. He comes with a checkered injury past. And so, we've got to hope that we don't have another Omar Richards on our hands, and that he's fit, and that he hasn't passed his medical with a broken leg. And I'm sure that's not the case. But, like anyone, having seen highlight clips, the fact that he plays for Dortmund, which is a club known for producing young players, you look at what they did for Sancho's career before it went wrong at United, you look at what they've done for Jude Bellingham. I think it's really exciting, and it's nice that Forest are able to bring in those talented players of pedigree. So just hope he's not going to get injured. I think it gives us a bit more option going forward. I really hope that Callum Hudson-Odoi finds his feet. But it just adds a bit more depth to that attacking lineup, and it's really exciting. We've got Alanga coming back. Taiwo scored again against Arsenal, obviously, because he's an absolute, fantastic striker. Yes, there's plenty to be excited about going forward in the attack for sure.
Yeah, I think Reyna as well, being young and even though I think also I saw some criticism yesterday from Forest fans about the deals that were done, and kind of think actually we've actually been very clever this window, given these loans with these option to buys at the end. So if it doesn't work out, we won't have to buy them. It's not like Chris Wood when he had that kind of season-long loan, and then it was the obligation to buy him. Forest couldn't get out of that. When we look at Mangala, Max obviously departs the club, head held high and a very decent amount given probably what we bought him for. 10 million for the loan fee, 20 million as well at the end of the season to make it permanent. That's 30 million, frees up more room for the Premier League regulations, given the troubles we find ourselves in. It's got to be a smart move really all round, but a player will probably still miss a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. It really is smart. It's smart business. And for a club like Forest, where they are in the league, where we are in our journey at the minute, we're going to have to get used to selling players that we grow to adore or grow to really appreciate. You know, I hate to anticipate this, but I would imagine at some point in the next 12 months, we're going to have this situation with Morgan Gibbs-White, and it's going to hurt Forest fans even more. But Mangala, I just think he's a class act, both sort of on the ball, but the way he carries himself. You know, he's a bit of an unsung hero, and I just think his story at Forest has been great. He came in, he looked great at the start of the season, and then he sort of struggled for a big bulk of that first season. But at the back end of last season was fantastic, really important in us staying up. And it's just been that solid character. I don't want to repeat what I've said, but I really appreciate that. And he leaves with, you know, what a great position to leave a football club in the right way. You know, as a professional, just from a footballer's perspective, he leaves the club with the fans' support, with fans' admiration. And, you know, I hope that his career goes really well, but it is going to be, you know, it's going to be a miss for Forest, but we do have a luxury of having quite a lot to play with in midfield. Danilo, Sangare, Dominguez, Gibbs-White, Ryan Yates. And so because of that, Forest have been able to make what I think is a really wise, smart decision in the transfer window, which hasn't necessarily been a hallmark of the past few transfer windows.
Yeah, totally agree. We are live on Facebook and YouTube. For anyone watching, do get your comments in. Be sure to read them out. Any comments about the transfers, what you make of the new keeper, and whether you agree that Matz Sels might be the most important £5 million that Forest spend all season. When we look at another incoming player, someone that signs not yesterday, the day before, so late last night on the 31st, Max, Rodrigo, Ribeiro, Sporting Lisbon, striker, very young, loan with an option to buy of 10 million. Again, but quite a smart move, but someone that we don't know, as you touched on a bit ago, we don't know a lot about, kind of played in this academy. But I suppose somebody that provides... Look, you know, if this guy turns out to be a wonder kid, then it'll be held as an incredible piece of business. But someone that provides another attacking option if Chris Wood is unfit or he gets injured, the same with Taiwo. We've only got two strikers at the football club, so this is another solid option. Yeah,
Ribero is an unknown. But what I think we can say from Nuno's track record of buying Portuguese players is that he's brought in some fantastic players. You know, you look at Diogo Jota now, similar stature to Ribeiro. And so what I do like is that I trust Nuno's track record, if you like, with bringing in players that no one's ever heard of. I also think that it's nice to have a player of a slightly different physical stature. We've got two, and they're not just, but two bruisers up top. You know, particularly Taiwo is incredibly quick and has got a lot going for him and can be really skillful, I think, despite the fact he sometimes looks like he moves in an unorthodox way. But it's nice to have maybe sort of something slightly different going up top. But other than that, he is an unknown, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know a lot about him. But it's also nice to have a young player, you know, someone that hopefully will kick on this season and justify us buying him permanently. The only question I think I've got is, with the stakes so high this season, with a potential point span on the way, or points deduction rather on the way, potential, we don't know. We hope that's not the case. But where does an 18-year-old striker with very limited appearances in the top league in Portugal, where do they get an opportunity to bed themselves in. So there might be fans out there, I think, understandably thinking, hold on a minute, why didn't we get in someone that is just a bit more experienced? It's difficult to buy in a striker on deadline day that is proven at the Premier League level. But if we had someone in that was scoring goals, maybe in the Championship or something like that, there may be fans thinking that, and I understand that. But let's just hope that it works out and he hits the ground running.
Yeah, for sure. But I suppose it's always a difficult one with Forest, because fans will often question, Max, who's actually making these deals, who's being involved in transfer deadline day. Marinakis and his son have been at the City Ground all week after the Arsenal game. And also for the landmark kind of event they did on racism and tackling that, and some really big names attending there. And then obviously Ross Wilson, the Chief Football and Recruitment Officer is his official title. And then they're now working with George Mendes. Do you think that's too many people at a football club to make the decisions, Max? And I suppose, do you trust the Marinakis family on their own to make these signings, given some very dodgy business in the past? Saying that, they've also brought some very good players in, some very high-profile players that have worked wonders for us. You look at the likes of Taiwo, for example. Or is this a case of, everyone working together, George Mendes, a super agent, his links within football, and it works well? Because it has failed with Mendes in the past in the Championship.
It's a really good question, Max. I don't care how many people are making the decision, as long as there's a shared vision and a shared strategy. Every time I'm on with you, Max, I'm frequently saying this, so I don't want to sound like a broken record. Forest's problem is that there's been no clear direction. When you look at clubs like Brentford, you look at clubs like Brighton, there's a clear blueprint about what they want to do. There hasn't been with Forest. And with someone like Mendes involved, that might be quite difficult. But despite that, you can't deny we've brought in some fantastic players as well. But I guess if you buy 40 players, you're bound to get some good ones. It's a really difficult question to answer. I don't own a football club, thank God. But let's just say, the Marinakis family deserve criticism and praise in equal measure for what they've for everything that they've done in the transfer window. They've brought some fantastic players in that kept us up last season. They've also taken us into a position where we've been charged with FFP. We have bought some poor players, but there clearly has been a shift, this net zero approach, and that is a good move, because we want to be sustainable. We want to make sure that this doesn't derail. This isn't a house of cards that now sort of just falls on the fans of the club. So it's a really complicated situation at any football club, I think particularly at Forest, with how involved the owners are on deadline day or in our transfer strategy. But I'm forever hopeful for Forest, and regardless of all that, we stayed up last season, didn't we? And we just absolutely hope that we do this season.
Yeah, very interesting point there, Max. This comment saying the goalkeeper situation is a farce. When did they name the 25? Forest could potentially have 3 keepers on the bench until one of them keeps a clean sheet. It's a very, very good point. Philip says, let's hope Reyna is signed by the same person who has done the other Bundesliga signings. That's not a bad point. George Sirios was heavily involved as head of recruitment at Forest when we got promoted. He was heavily involved in the Taiwo deal, and lots of others too. Marinakis actually got rid of him when Forest were going through a bad spell. He's now back at the club as like a non-executive type recruitment advisory role. So maybe, Philip, very good point that he was involved with this deal for Reyna yesterday.
Just on that, Max, yes. On that sort of, Sirianos, whilst I say I really want this clear transfer strategy and I want this vision that looks a little bit like Villa, Brighton, Brentford, I just think we're not going to get that with Evangelos Marinakis. He is a hot-blooded, passionate. We've seen the images of his TV screen in the director's box. That's who he is, and love him or loathe him, he is our owner, and so there's a part of me that just wants to embrace that chaos, or doesn't want to, but has to embrace that chaos. And with Marinakis, with that, red-blooded passion, there comes this. What am I trying to say? There comes this ambition. There comes this ambition to take Forest to, a whole new level, and that's great. But there also comes, decision making that changes by the day, and so this is sort of part of Forest's makeup at the minute, and so we've just got to get used to that. And I think the Sirianos point that you just made is just a perfect example. Things aren't going well, we'll sack him, we'll blame him. Things sort of level out, we'll bring him back in. 1 minute we want to sack Cooper, next minute we want to keep him. 1 minute we beat United 3-1 or whatever it is, 2-1, can't remember. And the next minute we're writing letters to the PGMOL. So, this is Forest at the minute, and I think we just got to be here for the ride a little bit.
Yeah, it's never an easy ride ever.
No.
How many years of supporting Max? I don't know about you, but it just seems that there's never. I don't think there's a normal day of Forest. There's never a day where you wake up and you check Twitter and it seems normal on the Forest timeline. Let's look at kind of players out the door as well. We touched on, they included Mangala. Scarpa went as well, obviously kind of a while ago. Scott McKenna, Andre Santos' loan being terminated, which was probably quite disappointing to see given the kind of last minute move for him in the summer. Alex Mighton and Brandon Aguilera go out on loan. Ethan Horvath is also made permanent for a move to Cardiff. So another keeper shipped out and then another keeper brought in. Otherwise, we'd have had 5 keepers. When we look at Aguilera, Max, I kind of remember standing in the away end at Blackpool, and even though Forest nearly threw that away, the one positive I really took away from that game was that Aguilera looked like a hell of a player. And yes, it was against League One Blackpool, and yes, it was an FA Cup third round replay. But in the same sense, there was Premier League players there for Forest that weren't performing that night.
Yeah.
Whereas Aguilera looked a real threat. And he goes to Bristol Rovers on loan. What a scoop for them. If there is any Bristol Rovers fans watching this, you have one hell of a player. I'm actually surprised that Forest let him go quite late last night on loan. Are you?
I am. But when we brought in Reyna and this Ribeiro, I think that it's I think it's a wise move. Yes, Brandon Aguilera looked really sharp against Blackpool. I've got a really good feeling about him, and I've got a good feeling that he's going to go to Bristol, and he's going to tear it up. And how great would that be, to see the EFL highlights coming through, Brandon Aguilera scoring screamers from 30 yards. And I think that is what he needs. What I loved about his Blackpool performance, Max, was just how sort of aggressive he was. He's only, he's diminutive in stature, but he looked like, since he's joined Forest, he packed on a bit of muscle, and he was getting stuck in. Sorry, I'm getting emails through. So I'm really confident and hopeful for him, and think that it is a good move. Let's be honest, he wasn't going to get much game time in the Premier League. It's important that he gets used to the English game, and hopefully he'll come back in the summer, and wherever Forest are, will start to then contribute to the team. But you look at someone like Alex Mighton, who's also gone out on loan. He's a perfect example of how it can go wrong. And that's not a criticism of Mighton, but how you've really got to manage these young players' careers, particularly when they're smaller and they're playing in a league full of, big, strong blokes. And so I'm confident for Aguilera, and really hope that Mighton can kick on as well.
Yeah, Alex Mighton goes to Port Vale on loan until the end of the season. Wanted to touch on Scott McKenna, whose contract was nearing the end, very near the end. He goes to Copenhagen. A good move for him, but again, somebody that has been a great servant for Forest, was involved in the Championship, was involved in the promotion-winning season. Sad to see him go. Obviously, more rumours yesterday about Joe Worrell possibly departing, but when you look at a player like Scott McKenna, you've just got to feel what a great servant they were to the football club, really, Max.
Oh, big time. I mean, man of the match at Wembley, instrumental in us getting promoted with Joe Worrell. And I just feel like a little bit like Mangala. It's slightly different because he wasn't playing, but there's no sour taste in the mouth with Forest fans and McKenna, with Forest fans and Mangala. And I just think, thank you. It's that horrible cliche. Don't be sad. Don't be sad. It's finished. Be glad that it happened. But it's true. I mean, he is a legend in my eyes for this generation of Forest. Absolutely fantastic signing. I think it's a great move for him. Copenhagen, I'm pretty sure they have European football as well.
They're playing Man City in a few weeks.
Oh, well, cracking. So, well, good luck, mate. But it'd be great for his international career. He'll be able to play European football. And it'll be exciting playing abroad in front of, in a big stadium like that. So, yeah, I just, what a top bloke. Top bloke.
Yeah, spot on, actually, there. Totally agree. Great servant to the football club.
Yeah.
I suppose, overall, Max, difficult question before we have a look at the Bournemouth game. What would you give if you have to give a rating of kind of A, B, C? In the thumbnail, I gave it a rating of B. A pretty solid transfer window. Nothing much to shout about given the FFP. Do you agree? Yeah. Something along the lines of that for a rating in terms of incomings and outgoings?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the ins and outs. I mean, it's definitely a B. What would make it an A, Max? I mean, what would make it an A? Maybe if we'd have signed a keeper that was slightly more well-known, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be any better. Maybe if they'd signed a striker that was a little bit more proven and experienced. But, I try as best as I can not to sort of come out and just lambast Forest. I can't, I am critical at times of their approach and what's happened at the club. But there's also lots of positives. So I think solid transfer window. It is such a relief that there's this more careful, considered approach, sell before you buy, etc. So, solid B.
Yes, totally agree. Let's look at the Bournemouth game. Moving on from transfers, deadline day finished until the summer again, and you'll have to do it all over again for TalkSport, Max. But let's look at Bournemouth Sunday in front of the TV cameras. Another big game away for Forest. Bogey team Bournemouth is I think what a lot of people say. I suppose, Max, you've got to be targeting this game as I wouldn't say must win because we're not at that stage, but it's a game that Forest should be going and targeting and winning away at the Vitality because it's those teams that are going to be in the mix with Forest this season, albeit Bournemouth are on quite good form at the minute.
Yeah, Bournemouth are a really good team, Max. Sorry, I keep getting these emails through. I don't know how to mute them. Anyway, but Bournemouth are a really good team. I remember watching right at the beginning of the season when Bournemouth were losing quite regularly and looked like they were relegation candidates. I remember watching thinking they're playing some good football here. Iraola's, looks like he knows what he's doing. And lo and behold, they trusted in the manager, trusted in the plan, as cliche as that is, apologies. And look where they are. They've gone away to West Ham last night, who are flying, who've, I think, lost 1 in 11 games. And got a point. Dominic Solanke is clearly the danger man. So while we're not going to be plagued by Kiefer Moore, Dominic Solanke did get a hat-trick against us not too long ago. And so we've got to be really careful with that. I think Murillo was fantastic against Arsenal, and so he needs to be on that sort of form to keep Solanke out. But Bournemouth, I don't know if this is just me. I lived there, Max, for 8-9 years and absolutely love the place that is Bournemouth. But cannot stand them because all my mates are Bournemouth fans, and we never. I can't remember us beating them, particularly in Bournemouth. Remember that night right at the end of that Championship season where the referee had an absolute clanger, should have given Sam Surridge a penalty. For me, they're a bit of a bogey team. Do you think that's fair to say they're?
I do. I think they are. I think when they come to the City ground. They just always seem to get something. They came back from, I can remember last season's game of, were we 2-0 up or
we were 2-0 up, Max.
Yeah, 2-0 up and threw it away. It's just games like that where I think there's a lot of anger towards them. Fair play to them. They come to the City grounds, they get points, and they just prove kind of that they're a very hard to beat side. And I suppose, Max, when you take Forest's away form into consideration and some good away performances recently, if you take positives out the Brentford game, one problem that Forest faced under Cooper was scoring. We're not facing that problem now under Nuno as such. With players back, with Taiwo back, and with more coming back from the AFCON, surely for the Bournemouth game, you'd like to think that with a decent starting 11 for Forest, you're not going to be conceding those silly goals. You're going to be able to score 2 away from home and be able to leave with at least a point.
Yeah, and that's, in my understanding, that's Nuno's bag, isn't it? I mean, he sets his teams up well, and so I think it's got to happen soon, but I think it will, where we just sort of settle at the back. And we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago about having some sort of consistent defensive lineup. I sincerely hope that Harry Toffolo plays instead of Tavares. Was Tavares sort of? Could he not play against Arsenal?
Yeah, he was club tied. It was a deal in because he is on loan, so it was a deal in that basically he couldn't play against Arsenal.
Well, I hope Toffolo plays, and I hope we just sort of look solid. But we can't deny. I know they're a smaller club in terms of the size of their stadium, but you've got to praise Bournemouth for what they've done and what they've built on limited resources. And I think it's going to be difficult, Max, but we've got the players that can do it. Taiwo, Gibbs White. It'd be great if Reyna came in and did something. If Sels was solid, I'm always hopeful. And of course, going back to your original point, although they're on great form, we need to be going to places like Bournemouth and picking up points. And so it's just we're just going to see what we get on the day.
Yeah, definitely. Another comment here. If there is a significant points deduction, Forest needs to average about 1.5 points per game between now and Burnley, with Newcastle, Villa, West Ham and Liverpool on the horizon. Bournemouth is a must-win. I don't think you can actually disagree with that. It's a very good point.
Yeah, say no more. Get her on the pod, mate.
Yeah. Are games really starting to become these must-wins now, given this possible points deduction, Max?
Yes. They were before. And even more so now. I think and I hate to say this because I think what's happening to Everton is unprecedented. They, more so than Forest, have become the scapegoat and the whipping boys by the Premier League. But I think one of our big hopes is that if we get a points deduction, Everton also get another one. And again, that feels difficult to say because I'm not quite sure the way that's all happened at Goodison Park. I don't think that's right. But if Everton, I think it's a 3-horse race between Forest, Luton, and Everton. I think Burnley and Sheffield United are, dead certs at the minute, and Luton are just looking 4-0 against Brighton, Max. I mean, Luton remind me of us last year. Not that I can remember us beating anyone 4-0, but that team that have just come up, that really have that momentum, that identity, that sort of fortress mentality. And I wouldn't be surprised if Luton stayed up. So, but I do think it's going to be between us, Everton, and Luton. And the listeners or watchers comment there is absolutely brilliant. I mean, that's a great stat. 1.5 points per game. I'm going to remember that. And that is going to be a challenge, massive challenge in the Premier League. But it's all to play for. I feel this real sense of concern. Even with the transfer window stuff, as a fan, I wasn't massively excited because I was sort of thinking, hold on a minute, we could get a points deduction. We're probably going to get a points deduction. So we're right in it. We're in the relegation zone at the minute. If you look at it that way, I hate to be too pessimistic, and so we've got to have that sort of dogfight mentality. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, it's worrying times, but I certainly think we've got the players to do it.
Yeah, time will tell. Well said, Max. Very good discussion today. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. And fingers crossed we'll finally get a result against the bogey team Bournemouth on Sunday. Absolutely love it. Right, if you've enjoyed it, remember to give us a like, share and comment across YouTube for this live edition of Garibaldi Red. And thanks for all your comments as well on Facebook. we'll be back next Monday to discuss all of the fallout from the Forest Bournemouth game. Fingers crossed we'll be talking about a win then. Remember to leave us a review if you do enjoy, and we will see you next time. Have a great rest of your week and weekend. See you then.